It doesn't really rain here between April and October, so I'm happy when it finally arrives. It's just that rain and sunshine tend to be mutually exclusive.
I pretty much knew the long days of summer would not be the test of my panel and battery size choices. It was only a matter of a couple of months before the admittedly mild Southern California winter pushed my system to the limit. My battery choice was set in stone. The 40 kilowatt hours of installed capacity was also the maximum Enphase could accommodate. Whether or not a smaller capacity battery would have worked was a question that time has now answered.
The solar panel array size, however, was different. I installed 24 panels because that's the most my primary roof would accommodate. But my garage roof can take another 8 panels, and indeed, I had the installer pre-wire that possible addition so my walls would not have to be torn open if I decided to do that. My summer into fall experience told me my 24-panel array was not too big, even though on sunny days the array was capable of producing energy beyond my needs.
Would 8 extra panels be worthwhile? Certainly the big capacity surplus seen in the summer quickly disappeared as the days grew shorter.
The longest day of summer, June 21st, lasted 14 hours, at least where I live. December 21st, it was 10 hours, so the winter day was 4 hours shorter. During midsummer, power production lasted from about 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. In mid-December, I saw significant power generation only from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. 13 hours in summer versus 8 in winter. So that's 5 hours less power generation in the winter versus a 4-hour shorter day. Why the discrepancy? Well, it's not just the shorter days. The sun has also dropped lower in the southern sky, which means more afternoon panel shading, for my house at least, from my neighbor's trees that I don't see in the summer when the sun sets further to the north. Even with blue skies all day, the maximum energy output capacity has now dropped from about 60 kilowatt hours or so in the summer to less than 40 kilowatt hours.
Still, the 40 kilowatt hours of daily blue sky winter production is enough for my needs, but certainly no excess capacity. I now have to manage my energy use, find a use for my excess power when I have it, or lose it. Adding another 8 panels would boost potential capacity by a third, almost another 15 kilowatt hours on sunny winter days. Really nice, but just not needed on sunny days.
With the cooler temperatures, the heat pump runs much of the night, so the battery drains more. Now, in winter, even when it's sunny, the battery level routinely drops to about 60 to 65% by morning, even if it started near 100% the previous afternoon. That's even lower than late summer's rainy, overcast days.
Now, managing my energy use comes down to matching the available energy production to my 3 major peak loads. That is, the house battery, the car battery, and the clothes dryer. The amount of energy they require is not flexible, but when they get it is. Charging the house battery is my top priority every day. It needs as much stored energy as possible by the end of every day, because tomorrow may not be so forgiving. So let's talk about car charging. I could drive my car for 2 weeks without charging, with its 75 kilowatt hour battery and 300-mile range. But it would then take several sunny days to charge it back up. So I plug it in whenever its charge drops 10% or more, whenever my panels can produce some extra power.
Being retired, I don't have a daily work commute, But I do take my dogs to the local nature trail every morning. That's only a 6-mile round trip. My more or less weekly shopping trip is quite a bit longer, 40 to 60 minutes on the road. Southern California is an inconvenient sprawl. That drive typically drains 15 to 20 kilowatt hours worth of energy from the car battery. The house battery charges in the morning while I'm out, and then the car gets its turn, assuming the sun is shining and the house battery is clearly on its way to a full charge. Adding 20 kilowatt hours to the car on an overcast day is obviously a non-starter, when the panels may only be producing 5 to 15 kilowatt hours during the whole day.
Using the house batteries to charge the car battery is also a bad idea, even if the house battery is 100%, just because such a transfer is not very efficient. There's a lot of heat generated when you push current into and out of lithium batteries. The data from my system shows that when you put energy in the batteries, you only realize a little less than 60% of that energy when you pull it out.
This includes losses from the microinverters, which convert direct current to alternating current electricity, and the reverse. Even though the inverters are about 96.5% efficient, with the 4 conversions needed to charge the car from the house battery, that would amount to about a 14% energy loss. The microinverters convert the solar panel's direct current to the house alternating current. Then the battery's inverters convert that AC to DC to charge the house battery. Then, when you pull power from the battery, its microinverters have to convert the direct current from the battery back to alternating current used in the house, which is then sent into the car to be converted back to direct current to charge the car battery. Every conversion involves losses, producing waste heat.
This battery inefficiency does have one benefit, however. It helps to heat my well-insulated garage in the winter. So I charge my car whenever extra power from the panels is available, pretty much on sunny days.
Same thing for doing laundry, sunny days. Clothes dryer consumes a lot of energy. Unlike some larger households, I certainly don't need to do laundry every day.
Other basic energy uses always get power. The heat pump, hot water, power for refrigeration and cooking, power tools, lights, computer, and my mandatory evening at the movies. Those amplifiers throw out a lot of heat. So you need to manage your energy usage to maximize the potential of your system. But if energy production falls below a certain minimum, there's not much you can do without, shall we say, becoming more primitive.
If sunny winter days can yield 40 kilowatt hours of energy, what happens to that when it rains? Does it go below a certain minimum? On November 8th, output dropped to just 5.5 kilowatt hours. And on December 11th, even less, 5.3 kilowatt hours for the day. November 8th was a very gray day with all-day rain. Typical temperatures for Southern California, 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Power peaked at just 1.2 kilowatt, but mostly the 24 panels were only generating 5 to 600 watts. On that sort of day, adding 8 extra panels would have added less than 2 kilowatt hours, not a significant amount. The battery charge dropped to 50% by the next morning, but November 9th brought lots of sun with some clouds. Enough energy from the sun to fully charge the home battery and my car by the end of the day.
So a single bad day doesn't really pose a problem, even in winter, if followed by a good day. But about a month later, I would find out what would happen if one bad day was followed by another.
December 11th was cold with rain all day. At 7 a.m., the battery charge was 67%, before continuing down to a relatively steady 62%. The average maximum power produced by the panels was 1 kilowatt. Most of the time it was no more than 700 to 800 watts. Only 5.3 kilowatt hours total was produced for the day. With another 8 panels adding a third more energy production, the system would only have generated another 1.7 kilowatt hour, which would not make a significant difference. The battery further drained to 50% by 9 p.m. The next day, December 12th, started out at 37 degrees, raining, forecast to be cold and overcast all day. The battery charge had dropped to 25%. By mid-morning, it was down to 21%. I was worried the batteries would completely drain by the end of the day, or perhaps overnight if there was some charging in the afternoon.
How would I deal with that? How should I deal with that? My first thought was to flip the breaker to reconnect with the grid. But then after a period of time, I thought it might be better to see what happened if I let the system shut down, since the next morning promised sun. How would the system controller react? Would the system restart itself after the panels began to see the sun? So that was the plan, part of the grand experiment. And I thought it would be a gesture of solidarity with the people of Ukraine. I also considered it would really not be any different than a regular grid outage. And there had been a couple of those since I went off grid. I learned that after the fact. Some friends in town had been out of power for about 6 hours, sweltering in the summer heat without air conditioning.
As it turned out, the rain ended mid-morning and the sky lightened, and by 11 a.m. there was some full sun interspersed with clouds, and some decent power production. By 12:30, the batteries had made it up to 43%, so perhaps no system shutdown that night. Alas, clouds closed in around 1 p.m., and panel output dropped to just 1.2 kilowatt, with just half of that used to charge the batteries, 600 watts. The batteries had made it up to only 48%. I guess that would have to reach 55% by 3 p.m. to stay online until the sun came up the next day. Just 2.8 kilowatt hours more. If we had just another hour of full sun, that would do it. Unfortunately, the forecasts changed from partly sunny to overcast with more rain. At 2 p.m., during a spot of sun, I could see that the shading on the panels had already started. By 2:30, the battery charge was up to 52%. At 2:50, it was still at 52%, with more rain.
With 18.2 kilowatt hours produced for the day, another 8 panels would have produced about 6 kilowatt hours of energy, adding another 15% to total battery charge, raising the 52% to a more comfortable 67% going into the night.
At 3:40, the panels were producing just 200 watts. The batteries had started discharging to power the meager 300 watts I was consuming at that time. Time to start the inexorable battery drain. I was expecting the sun the next morning, according to the forecast, but there was none of that, as rain was in the forecast again. The battery charge had dropped to 19% and stayed there for an hour, until the sky brightened with gaps in the clouds, and finally sun by 9:30 a.m. Panel output rose to their usual maximum during the periods of full sun. By 10:15, with sunny skies, battery charge was up to 33%.
It's now clear that my 40 kilowatt hour battery was not excessive. And it turned out, neither was it too small. During critical periods, my panels were not producing enough energy to charge the battery to 100%. So a larger battery wouldn't help if you didn't have enough solar output to charge it. And the solar array? 8 more panels would not be needed when the sun was shining all day due to an abundance of power generation with the existing array. And adding 8 panels would not add significantly more energy during days of persistent rain and dark clouds, on the order of 1 kilowatt hour for the day, that's all. However, those 8 additional panels would make all the difference to recharge the battery when sky conditions are mixed, when an additional 6 to 10 kilowatt hours could be generated. So the plan is to add the extra 8 panels on my garage roof, bringing the total to 32 panels. It's a relatively straightforward process, as the system is already wired for them. I will report on the impact of those new panels in part 3 of this video series. Sorry, but as I was preparing to wrap this report, I noticed the weather forecast going forward. Those other 2 rain events were gremlins compared to the coming 10 days in a row of rain and showers, described as an atmospheric river overrunning California. I had assumed, the challenges would be finished until after the 8 panels were in place, which would power me through future days of doom and gloom. But it seems nature wasn't done with me, just as the once-in-a-generation winter storm reminded the rest of the country who the boss is. The 10-day trial was an ordeal my system could not overcome, even with compromises to my energy use. I, of course, didn't charge my car, and neither did I do any laundry. But the worst cut was my large hot water heater. A couple of days in, I shut it off. Looking at this montage of energy charts over those 10 days, the downward pressure on battery charge is apparent. December 27th was a relatively low output day without car charging or laundry, but still using hot water. December 28th was a little brighter with decent production, but half what a full Sunday would have generated. The house battery was fully charged. December 29th brought more clouds and a weak 13.6 kilowatt hours energy production, while still maintaining good battery charge. December 30th, energy output dropped below 10 kilowatt hours, and with more bad weather ahead, I cut power to the water heater. December 31st produced a dismal 9.4 kilowatt hours for the day. I skimped on energy use, averaging just 300 to 400 watts of power use all day, consuming just 9.2 kilowatt hours for the day. This was not the sort of battery charge curve you want to see. January 1st took the battery down to 40% with rain and clouds, but some mid to late morning sun. 22.7 kilowatt hours was relatively good. With this atmospheric river, the forecasters were having a lot of trouble predicting, even hour to hour, the vagaries of rain and cloud. The battery charge made it up to 79% by 3:30. Still holding on. On January 2nd, the battery started out at 50% with some early sun, but the clouds started to move in by 9:30 and continued downhill all day. On January 3rd, light rain persisted all day. The panels produced just 7.4 kilowatt hours for the day. The battery started out at 52% at 9 a.m., up to 57% by 2. I looked at the last 6 days to see how much battery charge dropped from when the panels stopped charging in the afternoon to when they started charging again the next morning. 28 to 32%. Call it 30%. So I expected the charge to be 26% by 8 a.m. the next morning. Well, January 4th arrived, but the battery charge had dropped to 20%.
So a 36% drop during the 17 hours the battery alone was powering the house. A light rain continued until noon, and then partly cloudy, with some sun and some battery recovery. The forecast for January 5th was for heavy rain, with expected minimal energy production. So the battery would have to carry the house for 42 hours. Not even close. It would likely run down to zero by morning, leaving me without power for 24 hours, at least. Letting the system shut down then, food would spoil, the house would go cold. Not going to happen. The new plan is to connect to the grid again late today, after 6 months off grid.
I wanted to talk about how my experience can translate to what others might encounter when trying to maximize home energy generation. Here in Southern California, conditions are just about ideal for solar independence. Same thing for other southern states with a large proportion of sunny days.
Enphase has run simulations of annual system output for various panels and microinverters for 8 U.S. cities, taking into account latitude and climate. I'm halfway between San Diego and Los Angeles, so I use the LA simulation for my system. I've calculated the percentage of annual energy output for the other 7 locations, expressed as a percentage of what I get here. The differences in solar gain are significant, but not dramatic. The size of solar array could be adjusted to compensate, for sure. But, and this is a big but, these percentages are for an entire year, and to be completely energy independent, you need to get through the worst case scenario, not just the average.
As I was preparing this, what the National Weather Service described as a once-in-a-generation winter storm was making its way across the country. Record cold temperatures, ice, gale force winds blowing deep snow into huge drifts over most of the U.S. At my house, December 25th brought blue sky and a high of 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So, who am I to say what is possible at your house? Certainly, if your solar array is covered by a massive snowdrift, it will be very difficult to be energy self-sufficient. But likely possible for 9 months of the year. And it's certainly possible to minimize your use of non-renewable energy by installing a solar plus battery system. I would say that getting to 90% of energy independence would be a cost-effective endeavor. That last 10%, however, could double the bill, at least. Any system design would, of course, depend on whether your goal is to save money or to save the planet. Solar panel prices have come down substantially to the point of being widely affordable, especially if you factor in the various government subsidies. Solar panels are the critical element in a solar plus battery system. The battery is a buffer. It cannot supply energy on its own. Battery prices have also dropped precipitously, but they're still expensive, even with the government tax credit. For sure, battery prices will continue to come down. Going with the battery big enough to make you 100% energy independent is probably not cost-effective now, but getting 1 or 2 10 to 13 kilowatt-hour batteries should be, as that battery capacity took care of my overnight storage most of the time.
Driving an electric car is a great way to minimize your use of fossil fuels, although if you commute to work during the day, you won't be able to charge your EV directly from your solar energy production. If you sell solar power to your utility during the day, you can use those credits to charge your vehicle overnight using grid energy. In any case, electric cars are a joy to own and drive.
Well, I'm off grid again after a short intermission. So next time, I'll report on my planned 8-panel solar annex, and also on the next big challenge. That would be firing my pottery kiln. It's plugged into a 50 amp circuit and uses that electricity to raise its internal temperature above 2200 degrees. The firing cycle takes about 12 hours to reach temperature before the long cool down starts. Should be a tough test. This is one I will definitely not be saving for a rainy day.
As always, thanks for watching.